Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Black Power Hour. My name is Karin Stanford. As you all know, I am a professor of political science and Africana studies at CSUN. Joining me in moderating this conversation is Keith Rice, a historian and archivist for the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center. He is also a doctoral candidate at Claremont University in history. And also joining us and helping us with technology is Brandon Lynn, who is a cinema and television major and an archival assistant at the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center. For those of you who don't know, the Black Power Hour is an outgrowth of the Black Power Archives housed at the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center. Currently, we have about 22 oral histories and photographs that make up the archive, and we expect to have about 5 more interviews completed by the end of the summer. So if any of you are interested in searching or checking out our material, please go to the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center website. That information should be in the chat. And I also want to say that this program is being sponsored by Dean Yan Searcy of the College in Social and Behavioral Sciences at CSUN, and the information to the college is also in the chat. Now, please note that although we have titled the program the Black Power Hour, sometimes our conversations go beyond an hour. So we've scheduled this one to end at about 19 minutes. And in terms of our agenda for today, we will begin with an introduction and hold a dialogue with our guest, Ron Wilkins, lasting about 20 minutes or so. And then the remaining time is allotted for you to join the conversation. And finally, I'm going to ask those of you who are with us to please click on the assessment instrument in the chat and respond to the 4 brief questions before you leave. So Ron Wilkins is our guest for today, and Keith Rice will introduce him.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford. Ron Wilkins is a former member of the Slausons Village and a key activist during the Watts Uprising of 1965. He was the field commander of the Community Alert Patrol, CAP, one of the first police monitoring projects in the United States. As a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC Los Angeles, Wilkins was the target of extensive police harassment and surveillance. During this period, he became active in a variety of Pan-African causes, including revolutions in Grenada, Central and South America, and throughout Africa. He is most recognized in the US as an organizer for the cultural boycott against the apartheid regime in South Africa. Ron is a teacher, formerly serving as an adjunct professor in the Africana Studies Department of Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. Presently, his work emphasizes the hidden history of Black and Brown solidarity. Ron Wilkins is also a brilliant photographer who has amassed an extensive photographic library on African people, both on the continent and throughout the diaspora. Please help me in welcoming Ron Wilkins.
So welcome.
Yes, and thank you to all of you, and especially to you, Sister Karin and Brother Keith, for inviting me.
So do we want to just we'd like to pull up some photos, and Ron, if you don't mind taking us through those photos, and then we'll begin the dialogue. But it'd be great for people to see you in various aspects of activism.
Okay, this photo was taken in 1966 when Community Alert Patrol was organized. And as far as my information goes, we were the first in the country to actually police the police. First civilian group of volunteers that drove our own vehicles and went out. That's a 1938 Plymouth. Beautiful. That's what we call the hoopty. And in those days, we loved what were called gangster cars, the old antique cars. And so mine was very well known, and I was very much hated by Los Angeles Police Department and the LA Sheriff's Department, and very much targeted by them. But that's me in my car. I've got on a Stetson hat, wearing my vest. I had Stacey Adams shoes on. We used to dress back in those days. We used to outdress the teachers at the high school. But that's me there in my Plymouth, 38 Plymouth. And you see the phone number there. This is in an era before there were area codes. The population had not grown as much as it is today, as it has today.
That's a beautiful photo.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
I was looking to see, you had to be serious and very much committed. And I like to say I was a street tough. I was very hard-headed. I was always ready for some action. And so, and you had to be very courageous to go up against LAPD. We used to say in those days that we didn't see the Ku Klux Klan marching in LA because the police were the Ku Klux Klan, just as the sheriff were. And it's coming out even more now in today's news. But yeah, I like my posture in this particular image.
I know we're not asking questions yet, but how old were you in it?
We're not asking.
I was in my teens. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Karen's gonna get on me. Sorry.
Yeah, I am. Okay, so let's move on to the next photo.
Yeah, the movement, these were supporters of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which is the organization I joined after spending about a year with the Community Alert Patrol, because that's how long it lasted. And this was a night that some of the people in Northern California came down to interview us and check out what we were doing. That's me there on the right with the smile on my face. And to the left with the other hat on there is Lanier Eggleston, Brother Lenny, we called him. But we were out on patrol, and they did a nice article about us and made us known to the large, help make us known to the larger public. So that's what you see here in this photograph. Mm-hmm.
Brandon? There you are, Ron Wilkins.
Yeah. Brother Gerald Horn is a very serious scholar, has just written so many books and done so much research. And he actually, on this particular book that he wrote on the uprising in so-called Watts Uprising, South LA Uprising Rebellion, you see me there to the far left. Again, I actually had a smile on my face. You can't see that smile very much in this one. And this was on the corner of Imperial Highway and Avalon, which was about a block or a block and a half from the point where Marquette and Ronald Frye were arrested in 1965. And so there I am in front of a crowd, and I was calling shots. I would, you see people looking in my direction.
Right.
I lived only a block and a half from there, even though I was from Slauson Village, which was my neighborhood organization. I was living in this area, which is technically Watts, but not actually Watts. And you see people throwing up fingers behind me, letting you know what neighborhood they represented. And I would turn to them and say, it's not about our neighborhood. We have to set aside any grievances that we have with one another. It's up against these racist police, and we got to whip them and run them out of here tonight. And I would say to the police I was facing right there that they were just a racist white gang with badges, but that we were going to whip them and run them out. And so that's the photo. And that appeared, by the way, on the front page of the LA Times. And I was proud of it. I didn't actually stand to be photographed, but when I saw someone with a camera, he was a young Black man who was a member of the Nation of Islam, who I knew, so I didn't dodge. But as soon as he snapped the picture, an LA Times photographer rushed in and got that one, and they put it in the paper.
Thank you. We do have in the chat, Dr. Henderson asked if we could point Ron out in each photo and make the picture larger if possible, so that our guests can see. I don't know if that's possible, but could we go back to that previous photo and point Ron out in the right? You could just put your little, what is it, that little X over it. Yeah, thank you. So that's Ron Wilkins in that particular photo. And you guys saw the first one with him in the car, and we know that's him, right? I love that photo. That's the one. And then that's him right there. Right. So hopefully you guys can see that. And we can move on to the next. Gosh. Ron, tell us about this photo.
This was, when was this? This was 1969. James Foreman, who was my mentor, he was the one in SNCC that we called the old man. I miss Brother Jim. He was a great organizer. He issued in 1969 what was called the Black Manifesto to white Christian churches and Jewish synagogues, and demanding $500 million be paid to Black people in reparations for the role of these religious institutions in our enslavement. And so we had, as a part of a coordinated strategy, on certain days around the country, we would storm into churches, take control, push the minister out of the pulpit, which is what we did here in Los Angeles. We went to First Methodist Church downtown. I pushed the minister out of the pulpit. I have to watch my words because I don't know if some of these things you can still be prosecuted for saying. There may be a statute of limitations, who knows? But in any case, we took over First Methodist Church, about a dozen of us. And this is some of us being released from jail after we had been arrested. This is Harold Welton on the other side here. And the sister there is Sandra Scott, who both of them were members of SNCC and went on to be part of the effort to push for reparations from the religious institutions. We had all just gotten out of jail, and this was an attorney that was representing us. And so it's interesting because just recently, only a couple of weeks ago, it was NBC had an interesting article that was published here nationwide talking about the role of the churches in slavery. And it's interesting that it's come out all these years later. This is like more than 50 years since we went to jail. And I called Harold Welton. I was laughing and telling him, man, we've been vindicated, because finally the major white press in this country is also saying that the churches had an incredible role in slavery. They went light on the Catholic Church, but you need to know the Catholic Church is the largest corporate entity in the world. And its assets are greater than the assets of the 4 largest corporations inside the United States. And so I could go on and on about the reparations movement and what we were doing, but I remember 475 Riverside Drive in New York is where the major Christian denominations are headquartered. And Jim Foreman marched into there. He had his cane. And when the white minister saw him come in, he said, "Oh, what do we have here? God help us." And Jim looked at him and said, "God can't help you now, you MF, because we've come for our reparations." And he slammed his cane down on the table. But it was so many memorable experiences from this period, demanding reparations from the churches, which need to be given to our people. So thank you
for that. And the next photo. Okay, yes, Ron, tell us about this.
This is in Southwest Georgia, in Lee County. The capital there is Leesburg. And this was in the town of Smithville. Smithville was home to New Communities Incorporated. New Communities was a 6,000-acre farm. And in 1973-74, it was the largest single tract of Black-owned land in the United States, because Black people were losing land. And of course, we've lost so much land and so on. And these are the workers who work the farm. Theoretically, working on the farm, you were supposed to be a part owner because it was supposed to be a cooperative, but that was not the case. They were paid laborers. They were earning on average 67 cents an hour. They would work out in the enormous heat. They would walk behind equipment, tractors that were spraying pesticides in the fields. And there were other organizations such as the Emergency Land Fund, which hired me. I was based in Montgomery, Alabama, but I ended up going. They asked me to go there and get hired, which I did. And I was given a shack to live in and paid $40 a week. And I ended up trying to find out what was going on. And I found out that there was so much corruption. The people who managed the place were taking a lot of the money, and aside from oppressing the laborers. And I began to organize them. But anyway, that's what you see here. And you can see most of these are young people, underage, a lot of stories here. One of the chief manager of the farm was a man named Charles Sherrard, who was a very highly celebrated former SNCC organizer in Southwest Georgia. He was running this place, and he was behind this abuse. And his wife, Shirley Sherrard, later on was appointed hired by Obama when he was president to be over agriculture there in Georgia. And I wrote a very scathing piece pointing out her history and his history and the mistreatment of all these people, the laborers that you see here, who I got to know very well, and so on. But that's what you see here in the image. I was arrested on the picket line by the Georgia State Police, who were joined by the FBI. And I was arrested right in the middle of the picket. And I had to, when I got out of jail, I had to come back to California to face some ridiculous charge, which was later thrown out. But it was a way to slow our efforts at pressuring the farm owners to come to terms with us. Eventually, by the way, you need to know that in fear of the Georgia wage and labor section, people there, the farm managers paid people back wages to try to make amends and so on. So we had some victory. We got help. We got help from Mac Lyons, who was the Florida State Director for United Farm Workers Union, a Black man who since has passed on, but he helped us organize a chapter of United Farm Workers Union among the workers there. But I didn't mean to go on so long, but I'm just trying to, I get worked up when I see these images because they remind me of some very important moments in my life.
Right, and these are important stories and important information that, we all need to know. And it's also important to know, as we talked about you being a Pan-Africanist, doing major work in Africa, in the South, and in the West. So you've sort of, taken the struggle to various spaces, which shows how well-rounded you are when it comes to your analysis. So the final photo is also when you were working with the Emergency Land Fund.
Land Fund, and being there, checking out what was going on. That's me as a younger guy. I had hair on my head then. And I'm standing next to Miss Annie Mae Hawkins, who has since passed on. She was the key organizer there among the Black labor force. Great woman. She had actually stole away from a white plantation to come to new communities when she was offered a job there. And she later said, regrettably, that she had actually stolen away from a white plantation only to end up on a Black plantation. That's how sad the situation was. But she was a very skillful, very committed organizer. And I miss her dearly, Annie Mae Hawkins.
Okay, thank you for that, for going through the photos with us. And Keith, you wanted to ask a question about his age during that time period, right?
Right, and yeah, how old were you when you started CAP or became involved with CAP?
Youngster, man, I was a teenager still. Still in my teens, or I might have just turned 20. I came to the meetings that where CAP was formed. The meetings were under the umbrella of the Temporary Alliance of Local Organizations. That's what the Black organizations at that time labeled themselves, that were coming together to meet. And this was the reason they were meeting, is because Leonard Deadweiler, who was a man in his mid 20s, was taking his pregnant wife, Barbara Deadweiler, to the hospital way across town because they thought she was in labor, and he put a white handkerchief on his car antenna as a distress signal, and he was speeding across town. LAPD gave chase, and finally they stopped him, and he stopped, and they claimed that the car lunged forward, which caused the officer, and I never forget his name was Gerald Bova. He shot Leonard Deadweiler and killed him. And we said this was one racist traffic stop too many, and we were ready, the city was ready to go off again. And remember, this was May of 1966, just 10 months after the Watts Rebellion. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of fear among the ruling people in the city that there would be another rebellion. And so we were meeting to try to see what we could do. And that's how the Alert Patrol came about. And I was there, and I quickly signed up right away. I said, I'm in. And but anyway, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Ron.
So I will ask one more question, and then we can open it up for conversation. We can talk about the Slausons, Cap, how you became involved in the Watts Rebellion, and other questions that our guests may have. So Ron, can you tell us about your family's migration story and where you grew up?
Okay, my family, I went to a family reunion just a few years ago in Texas, in Rockdale, Texas, which is in Milam County. And of course, Texas is one of the most segregated places, still is one of the most segregated areas of the United States. There was a man, what was his name? Now it escapes me. It'll come to me in a minute. But this man was a white man in Culpeper County, Virginia. And the oldest known member on our family tree was a woman. Her name was Harriet. And his surname was Richards. So she had the name Harriet Richards. Her and her 5 children were put on a wagon in Culpeper County a couple of years before the Civil War and taken by this white man all the way to Milam County, Texas, to Rockdale. And it's from there that the family began to sprout out and so on. And not far from Rockdale is Calvert, Texas, which is only about 6 or 7 miles, Calvert, Texas. That's where my mother was born. And my mother, she went to the colored high school, and she was taken from class from time to time to the cotton fields to chop cotton. And she used to tell me and my siblings those stories when we were small. And that began to fire me up and make me want to do something in terms of fighting for the rights of Black people in this country. But that's the family history. My mother, during the Second World War, left Calvert, Texas, and came to LA. And eventually she made her way up to Northern California, which is where I was born. I was born in San Francisco. And then I made my way she came from San Francisco. She later came down to Los Angeles. And she was a single parent, and there were 5 of us children, and it was very tough. And then the rest of the story is, I guess, all history now in terms of me getting involved in neighborhood organizations and eventually being labeled, being put in the Militant Black Extremist Index, which is an FBI index for certain ones of us that they have a real problem with. So I'm a problem for the system, the government, which is good. And which pleases them, yes.
We appreciate you. Does anyone want to start with questions, or if not, we can continue to talk about the Slausons, the rebellion. Okay, Dr. Henderson, Errol Anthony Henderson.
Oh, thank you so much, Sister Karin, and thank you so much, Brother Wilkins.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try to reduce this to just 2 tracks, if I can, Brother Wilkins. The first one goes back to that picture during the revolt, and when your background is Slauson, but you had the insight to say it's not about the neighborhoods or the sets we're from, it's about us and the police. And you mentioned some of the signs they had on. I wish you would speak to that. That's one track. And the other is about Tommy Yaquet, Tommy Halifu. And I got a chance to talk with him a little bit in the 90s. And I want to ask you about your relationship with him, or Slant, some of the other groups, but especially Halifu, if you have that. So one is the Slausons, and what gave you that insight? Because you're as young as they are, but you had this insight saying, no, it ain't about the set. And the other is about Halifu and Slant. Thank you very much, brother.
Okay, brother, let me give it my best shot. Slauson was a major transformative experience for me. Okay, I came into Slauson with an enormous amount of self-hatred, as so many of us grow up with, hating ourselves, feeling that we're nothing, because that's what gets promoted in school, that's what the major media promotes, and the rest. And it was Slauson helped me value myself, and I felt like I was somebody for the first time in my life, where before all that I had been pretty much dismissed in so many ways in society. And so it was a transformative spark for me. You mentioned, because it gave me a sense of belonging. The neighborhood, Slauson as a neighborhood, had a lot of pride, did a lot of great things. We were an organization, a club. We were, even though the system labeled us a gang. I'm always telling people that the real gangs are the police, these damn police, murderous gangs that have the law behind them and clearing them and so on when they kill us and brutalize us. So, but anyway, so so it helped me during the Watts Rebellion. See, I knew the Frys, I knew Marquette and Ronald Fry, and I lived a couple of blocks from them. And even though they were from another neighborhood organization, I had nothing against them. And I saw it was so clear that they had been mistreated. For example, when he got arrested, he had had a little bit too much to drink, and the highway patrol had pulled him over, and they decided to arrest him. And his mother got involved. But anyway, they also, a crowd began to develop, and Marquette ended up hitting one of the highway patrolmen, and that's what really ratcheted things up. I heard about it. I came around there. They impounded the car, and people were saying, well, you know, Marquette said to the police, he said, look, I'm drunk, but the car is not drunk. Why are you impounding the car? My mother's here to take the car, and so on. So you could see the injustice. And so that's what helps you grow and helps you develop mentally and helps you transform. This whole experience for me has been so transformative. You ask about Tommy Yaquet. I knew Tommy very well. Tommy was very strong, and he was very hard-hitting rhetorically. What Tommy over time disappointed me, and I'll tell you how. He disappointed me because he ended up organizing what was called the Watts Summer Festival. And the very businesses and powerful entities that control Los Angeles that we tried to drive out and burn out and punish during those 6 days in August of 1965 were all invited to this festival. They came into what was Will Rogers Park, which is now Ted Watkins Park, and Tommy would invite them, and they would come and set up booths and displays and promote themselves. And we got into big arguments about it. Tommy also got involved with the US organization, which was an organization many of us had problems with because, and I need to say this, some of their members pulled guns on me several times because they opposed the positions we took against the police and against the established order. And so that's where I had issues with Tommy Jaquette. But he was very close to that organization, and because he promoted the Watts Summer Festival, which invited into the community the very entities that we tried to destroy and punish and drive out in 1960 and during the uprising.
What is SLANT?
It was the Self-Leadership for All Nationalities Today. That was the acronym for SLANT was the acronym for that. Tommy Jaquette's organization.
Okay. Mr. Rice?
I have like two questions. You know, I understand how Slauson's neighborhood, Watts neighborhood, but still, as many Slausons I've talked to, you made a statement earlier. You said it's technically Watts, but not Watts. What did that mean?
Watts, as I understand, is only something about maybe 2.6 square miles is Watts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When the uprising took place, the powers that be imposed a curfew over a 54, keep in mind, 54 square mile area. Black people were enraged and had had enough all across South LA, not just Watts. So Watts is a misnomer for the uprising. And it didn't even technically start in Watts. 116th or 115th Street in Avalon is technically outside Watts. Okay? Mm-hmm. Watts is at Central Avenue, east of Central Avenue.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
So that's the first misnomer then around the rebellion, the uprising, is that it wasn't just Watts.
Right.
And it didn't start in Watts.
Right. Yes. Yeah, those are misnomers. Even they use this term now, South Central. I say, look, if you south of downtown LA, you in South LA. South Central is a term the government came up with after the uprising to define the area where most of our people are concentrated. But there's no East Central or West Central. So I'm old school. So for me, it's South LA. If you south of downtown, you in South LA.
I think we had that conversation before because there's no North Central Avenue. It's
exactly
at the south. So
there you go. Thank you. Yes. Thanks for that. Yeah. Yes. So
well, you know, Ron, I really appreciate these alternative views of LA and the rebellion and what happened. Can you talk about how you specifically became involved with the uprising?
Well, I'm standing out there. First, I heard the noise because I lived at 633 East Imperial Highway. Right, we lived in an apartment building, and you could, from the kitchen window, I could hear the crowd building after the Marquette Fry, after the altercation between Marquette and his family and the police out there. One member of our neighborhood, Kumasi, who you've had on, Kumasi, I think it was Kumasi, said, man, are you telling, or Bird might have said, man, are you saying it's something happening out there? I said, yeah. She said, I don't believe you. I said, so I put the phone up to the window. And they could hear through the phone, they could hear the crowd. I said, you hear the people? He said, yeah, we'll be right there. And they came down. So how I got involved is I went down there and I'm feeling the people are telling stories about members of the family or other neighbors being arrested and being brutalized. And I'm looking at the police taunting us and looking at the weapons. and it's firing me up. Like I told you, I said, you just a white gang with badges. That's all you are. You know, you got on a blue uniform and you claim a neighborhood, your precinct is your neighborhood, and so on. But we're gonna whip you and run you out of here tonight. And that became my posture. So, and then I'm reflecting on the history of South LA. Every time the police would kill somebody, they had what was called a coroner's inquest. And at the end of the coroner's inquest, they would clear the police. You know, that's why George Floyd, what happened, and I have so much love for George Floyd. George Floyd, his murder helped turn this whole thing around. Because, and people now got, of course, they got the phone, they got the cameras in the phone, and they could film the stuff. We couldn't prove stuff then. Part of what the Alert Patrol would do later, our weapons were our cameras. Because when the police would abuse somebody or do something that was take away, drive over somebody's rights, we would photograph that and we would give it to the news. But look at what's happened, you know. So, but anyway, that's how I got involved. I got involved because I was fed up. And you know, it's like you know, someone else once said, it was summer and it was hot, and we didn't have no jobs. You had nothing else to do. Nothing else to do but get busy. So let's get busy.
Okay, Dr. Austin has a question. Curtis?
Thank you. And thank you, Karin, and all of the people involved in putting this on. I've really enjoyed this and some of the other ones that I've seen and heard about. My question is, I just don't know. I'm shocked at everything I'm learning. So I've got like 50 questions. I'm gonna try to only ask one or two. But it kind of follows up on your last comment, Brother Wilkins. And that is, I've interviewed people from South LA, mostly Panthers, of course, and they talk about their politicization during this uprising, during this rebellion, and how they just, like you said, we weren't taking this anymore. And so they organized themselves. And in addition to, you know, expropriating things, they started defending people against, I don't know what it was, the Army, the National Guard, sheriffs, police, or whomever. And, you know, that felt good to them. And where I'm going with this is, I wonder if you could help us understand, because I'm coming from a Panther studies background, right? Can you help us understand the differences between the Slausons and the renegade Slausons, who people associate Bunchy Carter so much with? And which of these groups would have been more likely to follow Carter into the Black Panther Party, and why?
Well, you raise a very complicated thing, and it's very, very touchy. Within Slauson, there were probably, I'm estimating about 25 subgroups inside Slauson. There were flips, you know, there were warlords, there were, you know, who were also baby Slausons. There were assassins. I came into Slauson as an assassin, okay? And the Panthers are a very touchy topic, because in SNCC in 1968, we formed an alliance with the Panther Party, principally because Jim Foreman saw the Panthers as the possible nucleus of a national Black revolutionary party, and which is something he wanted to see. How he pushed for it very hard inside SNCC. And within SNCC, there were always debates about what the Panthers, where they were headed, and all the rest. So you ask a very touchy question. If you talk to Willie Mukasa Ricks, who's the brother who actually shouted Black Power on the Meredith March in 1966, Mukasa will tell you, he told me, I saw him not too far back, you know, SNCC, it was in June that SNCC came out with Black Power. The Panther Party came into existence in October of '66. And their major slogan was all power to the people. Mucasa told me, he said, man, think about it. The Panthers had enormous white support. We were pushing Black power, and we were telling white people to get out of the way, to write a check and get out of the way. And the Panthers were bringing white people into the organization and back into the black community, which was very interesting when you think about it. All power to the people is in talking about everybody. It's not specifically Black power. It's everybody. All power to the people. So you have to think about that. I'm kind of losing a little track of what you were saying. You were talking about what's interesting during the uprising is it was an opportunity for many of us who saw each other as rivals to actually come together, because now we had an enemy that we were fighting, a larger enemy, and we had to join forces to defeat him, or I saw police scream, beg for mercy, and run from us. Okay, we were fighting with our fists and with rocks and bottles. We were pelting them with what we had. For the most part, there very few guns were involved, and it was a major unifying event for us in the streets. Just like I was said before, during the uprising, they had what they called Charcoal Alley number 1 was 103rd Street and down where the businesses were. And then they had a Charcoal Alley number 2. What was happening, what people didn't realize who were outside of this, is that you had different neighborhoods in South LA. We were competing to see at the end of the night how many overturned cars in the intersection were set aflame in our area as opposed to another area. So it was neighborhood competition during the uprising taking place. Let me say this about the Panther Party. I'm in almost all the Panther films. Yeah. They never identified me.
That's
right.
I
had my afro, I had my leather jacket on and so on. And they never identified me because I was representing SNCC. You know, I was at Bobby Hutton's funeral, the first Panther killed. They had Marlon Brando on one side, and I was standing on the other side. They ID'd him, but they never ID'd me, because many Panthers want to take credit for that period as if there were nothing else in existence but them.
Right.
And let me say this, I want to be very clear. I'll say this to any Panther. The Panthers were some of the most courageous members of our community, all right? But the Panthers technically made a lot of errors. You know, when you're fighting a Goliath like the United States, and I'm just speaking theoretically now, you have to fight the war of the fleet. You have to fight guerrilla, you have to utilize guerrilla warfare. The Panthers spoke about it, but they didn't carry it out. I've said it before, you don't say today's pig is tomorrow's bacon, and then you retreat into a sandbagged building, fortified building, and the police just wait you out and kill some of your members, or they tear gas you out and then arrest who they don't kill and the rest. That's no way to carry on a struggle, okay? You also have to be clear about who you allow to be a Panther. The Panthers, we accused them then, and I'll say it now, of loose recruitment. They recruited a lot of police informants. When you look at that film on Fred Hampton, they made that guy O'Neill, who was they made chief of security. He used to drive Chairman Fred in Chicago to all his appointments. So he was the damn police. You can't have an organization like that. You can't build an organization and change a society by allowing police informants in your organization. So I'm just saying that's why you got me worked up into something else with your question. But let me say this.
I'm very interested in the Slauson piece of it.
Some of the best Panthers coming out of LA came out of Slauson. Raymond Masai Hewitt, we call him Bright Eyes. He later became Minister of Education. You had Captain Tommy Lewis.
Yeah.
He come out of Slauson, who was killed, Adams and Montclair in LA. So I'm just saying some of the, it just brings up a lot of feelings when you
do you have specific feelings you don't mind sharing about our apprentice Bunchy Carter?
I had problems with Bunchy.
Okay.
I didn't like Bunchy.
Okay.
Even though we're from the same neighborhood, I didn't like him. But so even though he gets a lot of promotion, you know, as such an outstanding Panther and all that, he wasn't the baddest dude from Slauson, that's for sure. But he was a tough brother, you know, not taking anything away from him.
Yeah.
But I had problems with him, so I don't promote him. There were others from the neighborhood that I feel much better about.
That's very good context. I appreciate that response.
Yeah. Okay, brother.
May I interject a bit, just because I know a little bit about the story, and I know Ron does not like talking about Bunchy at all, but can you tell us a little bit more, Ron, about the segments in the Slausons? Like, how did you become a renegade Slauson versus a flip or junior flip? And were you in any of those sort of subgroups?
He was an assassin.
I tell you, I was in.
Oh, you did say assassin, and what is an assassin? What does that mean?
That was another group within the that formed
right
in the Fremont High School in the bleachers, and a whole lot of us went into it. There were cliques. They were just like now. You got certain people you associate with that you're very close to. Mm-hmm. The same was with us growing up. The guys that I hung out with, the clique, Bird, Kumasi, Evers, Skidoo, I can name them. None of us were alcoholic. None of us were into drugs. That was part of what helped us bond with one another. And then you also, as I said, you had a lot of people go into when the movement began to take hold, the Nation of Islam, and a lot of us were listening to Malcolm X. You had a lot of key members of Slauson become Muslims and join the nation. And I remember the first time I heard the word Whitey, I said, who is Whitey? Brother said, watch out, because Whitey's coming out. Well, who is Whitey? But I'm learning from guys in the neighborhood.
Well, my understanding, I think Bird mentioned that because Bunchy and his crew or whatever crowd he was with were uncontrollable, or they were having difficulty controlling them, that's where the name Renegade came from. And Lyndon, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've been doing this research.
Yeah, there's some truth in that, and for the record, and I think Professor Wilkins can attest to this, Bunchy is not, or was not, the leader of the Slausons.
That's for sure.
Type of thing. He is a leader of the renegade Slausons, but not leader of the overall Slausons.
Right.
Right. I want to say something else about
all the stuff that you see on Wikipedia and all that kind of stuff. That kind of leads to that folklore, if you will.
But I guess there does need to be a clarification around, so are renegade Slausons, for lack of a better verb here in this question, are renegade Slausons fighting the Slausons? Or are they peacefully coexisting?
But listen, they're part of Slauson, but we also had internal rivalries. We had bickering, we had things going on internally. And we were all, Slauson stretched from the 60s through the 70s and into part of the 80s in South LA. We were the largest, it turns out, and it took me some time later on in life to reflect on this. We were the largest and probably the toughest. I don't mind saying it, probably the toughest neighborhood in LA. And we did extraordinary, we were trendsetters. We developed dances. We created the Slauson Shuffle. We went on Dick Clark show. we went on a number of TV shows. There were records made about the Slauson Shuffle. We put out, and 1 year we went back to the high school, which was our base of operations, Fremont, and we gave out 3 $500 scholarships to students. And no neighborhood organization to my knowledge, in the country has gone back to the school that was its base of operations and given out $500 scholarships as we did. We have reunions. We've had annual reunions for probably a quarter of a century now, yearly. And the guys and the women from neighborhoods beyond ours, who at times we were our rivals, we invite and we break bread together, we embrace, we all like the same music and so on. And so we do extraordinary things. I graduated from Fremont High School. I was a nobody. I was a mess up in school. I used to ditch on a regular basis. I graduated in 1963, but in 1993, I was inducted into Fremont's Hall of Fame because the principal at the time recognized that I had been about so much community service that we want to put him in our Hall of Fame. And so it's just been interesting. That's why I say Fremont and Slauson for me has been played a very transformative role in terms of my own consciousness and what I have done with my life, what I've decided to do with my life.
Excuse me, I have 2 quick questions here. One,
Lynn, let me just say this, and after you finish, I'd like to move on to talk about SNCC so that people can understand the character of Los Angeles SNCC.
Sure, sure. One, what is your take on this book, if anybody can see it, Rivers of Blood, Years of Darkness, that came out in '67, which to me kind of captured the environment at that time. And if you could, I use this as a segue into your take on, or your feeling on Ralph Featherstone.
Wow, brother, you bad brother, man. Good bad. Look, on that book, one of the most important things that the authors of that book put out is that Joe Nelson Bridget, who was from Slauson, he was 22 years old. He was the 22nd casualty during the Watts Rebellion. He went out like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He was at Florence and Miramonte in the store there. And a couple of sheriffs had been wounded outside the store trying to deal with people that were in the store. And they say at one point, this figure comes out of the store with a pistol in each hand, blazing. And the police had surrounded it. They literally cut him in half with a shotgun blast. But that was Joe Nelson Bridget. No one during the Watts Rebellion or the South LA Rebellion went out like Joe Nelson Bridget did. And so for many years after the Watts, okay, there you go. For many years after the rebellion, it was those of us from Slauson put on Watts Rebellion commemorations at Watts Towers. And we would give out a Joe Nelson Bridget Award to the person that had distinguished themselves in the year running up to that particular year, best against police abuse and police hostility. We give out a Joe Nelson Bridget Award. So that's mentioned in that book. And I'm so happy that they mentioned that. They describe it in great detail. And you mentioned Ralph Featherstone. Ralph Featherstone was a great brother in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I got to know him. He eventually was killed in a mysterious explosion in Bel Air, Maryland, when H. Rap Brown was being put on trial there, about to show up for trial. He and another brother named William Che Payne, they were both killed in a strange car explosion. But Featherstone was an outstanding brother and very sharp, intellectually very committed organizer. Also, Charlotte Featherstone, his widow, I got to know. also a very strong sister. They later developed what was called Drum and Spear Bookstore there in DC. Charlotte Featherstone has also since passed some years ago. She had some serious health challenges, but she passed away, but great sister. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Yes.
So Ron, can we just move on and talk a little bit about SNCC and what is it about the Los Angeles chapter? I mean, I don't know if it was founded as paramilitary, but how did you come to that space? And then what is your relationship like with the national sort of SNCC organization that's doing all the reunions? I don't see Los Angeles as a part of that, those commemorations.
I'm glad you mentioned that problem. There's a first of all, the LA SNCC, it was Jim Foreman's idea. Foreman came here and used to come here, 65, 66. I met him, I think probably in 1966. He would come here and do a lot of fundraising in the city. And I was still part of the patrol when we met. And we were impressed with each other, with the work that we were doing and our vision at that time. And he urged me to become part of SNCC and help start a chapter here, help start a chapter in LA, which I eventually agreed to once the Community Alert Patrol went under. And so in 1968, we organized a chapter, and we weren't a paramilitary chapter, even though we did have what we call a defense arm, a defense unit, where we readied ourselves, we prepared ourselves for encounters with police, and because you never knew when that was going to happen, because that's our enemy. But we organized, we had what other SNCC chapters had. We had NBWADU, which was an acronym for the National Black Anti-War, Anti-Draft Union. We encouraged Black men to not go to Vietnam and not become part of the military. And of course, I had refused to go join the military. We had study cells where we prepared ourselves ideologically. The women had a women's unit because having to deal with male chauvinism, which was a reality then and as now. We had a defense committee for H. Rap Brown, the chair, who had become chair in '67, because Rap was always getting hassled by the police and arrested and so on. We had eventually we had an idea for a liberation school where we could organize and influence the larger community. In fact, Angela Davis, I had met Angela in 1967 at a demonstration in San Diego and helped persuade her to come to LA to help us form the chapter in 1968, which she did. She came up here. We organized the chapter. Her assignment was to actually help us set up the Liberation School at the church up the street, which never happened, which was disappointing, but so much for that. We also had alliances with the Chicano community, with the Black Berets, not the Black Berets, the Brown Berets, what am I saying? The Brown Berets. I got to know their leadership very well, and we supported and spoke out for one another. We also developed a relationship with Reyes Lopez Tejerina and the Alianza in New Mexico, which were fighting to regain land taken from them by the government and so on. We had other efforts like supporting and defending University 5, the TSU 5. These were students that had been falsely arrested by officials in Texas and so on. I'm getting a sign that my internet is getting unstable. Hopefully I'll be able to stay on here. But anyway, these were things that we did. But we came under enormous pressure from the government. Our office was raided periodically. We got support from people like Shirley and Herb Magidson in Beverly Hills. They used to invite James Baldwin out to speak and promote SNCC, and they would invite their white friends who had money to come with their checkbooks and write checks to SNCC when they would get through, when Baldwin would get through speaking and so on. So we were doing a lot of work here and SNCC. I don't know why I think you have a problem with earlier SNCC people, some of the earlier SNCC people who never quite embraced us here in Los Angeles. Before SNCC's demise in 1969, I was even voted at the national level to be one of 10 deputy chairmen at the national level, aside from being director of the LA SNCC office. But in the SNCC reunion efforts that are going on now, some of the people based back east and in the South, they have never they don't acknowledge LA SNCC. I want to mention some beautiful SNCC women. Faye Bellamy was one bad sister. She's since passed on. I miss her. You have people like Mae Jackson in New York. You had Dorothy Dewberry out of Detroit. You had Gloria Richardson, who I had met at one point. You also had Elizabeth Batista Martinez, who has since passed on. She was one of 2 Chicanas that were in the Student Nonviolent Reporting Committee. But we were, I'm just saying, we had national impact from the work that we were doing here in LA. We did quite a bit of organizing and so on. I see Harold Wilkins is joining.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask, how was SNCC LA different from the other chapters, or was it pretty much, was it similar to all the other SNCC chapters, at least the ones in the South?
Well, what had happened is SNCC had gravitated from that, moved from the South essentially, and was based now in New York.
Okay.
New York became the national headquarters. It moved out of Atlanta. New York became and the Office of International, it had developed an Office of International Affairs, which was run by Jim Foreman. We also had, and it's important to mention this, we had the Afro-American Skills Bank, which later became the Pan-African Skills Project. The idea was we would encourage college students, Black college students in the US, to go to developing African countries and help them move forward and develop their infrastructure. Irving Davis was someone who eventually actually had that developed into the Pan-African Skills Project and was based in New York. Another beautiful brother that's passed on. But so many that I miss, yes. So, but I'm saying we were based in New York now. We weren't in terms of the national effort.
Okay, Dr. Henderson has a question.
Oh, thank you, Sister Karen. I'm staying on what Sister Karen's focus on SNCC. Now, you mentioned Sister Dorothy Dewberry from Detroit, and also Marion Kramer, who was originally from Louisiana, was a member of SNCC. And both of them were members of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, which is where James Foreman's going to come. And they took exception with Brother James with respect to the manifesto as well. And this was clearly, the League was a clearly self-described Black Marxist organization. That's how I describe itself. But my big point was about SNCC's route and the women, Dorothy Dewberry, Marion Kramer in particular. And I want to ask in this context, and I'm really trying to resist not to ask this other question, Brother Wilkins, but I want to stay here. I wanted to ask in that context, Brother Wilkins, would you share with us what was SNCC's vision of revolutionary struggle at this point? Because you mentioned the Regis Debray's reference, the War of the Fleet. You mentioned that, so I wanted to get a sense. What was their framework? And I gotta ask you this: was part of the problem with the, and it could be just yes, no, Brother Wilkins, I know you didn't want to stay here, was part of the problem with the Panthers in LA, that the LA chapter was started by Earl Anthony. I hate the resemblance of our name. We spell our first names differently, and Anthony's not my last name, but is that Earl Anthony helped establish it, and we know he was an informant. And he starts the Panthers in LA. That's the one I was, if you don't want to deal with that, that's fine. But the main one was through the SNCC and the sisters, Brother Wilkins.
Well, I agree with you about pointing out who Earl Anthony was, being an informant. I don't, the stuff that happened in Detroit with the League of Revolutionary Black Workers and certain people later taking positions against Jim Foreman, it's a bit complicated for me because I wasn't in that area and I wasn't as close to Foreman then. Foreman, I'm still here in California, right? I remember when the Black Manifesto was issued, we were there in, where were we? Chicago? But we had some groups come out and some Black groups come out and oppose us when Foreman came out and demanded the reparations from the churches. I'm trying to remember the name of that group, major group there. But you talk about what was the ideological direction. Some of the influences that we were getting were from people like James Boggs. James Boggs wrote an interesting piece, some of you may have it. It's called The Awesome Responsibilities of Revolutionary Leadership. And he said, it's not about voting yourself into power, voting for Tweedledee over Tweedledum. It's not about these little skirmishes of slapping a cop on a street corner or busting out a window in a store. It's about taking power, period. And he talked about that we needed a serious Black Revolutionary Party that was prepared to take power. He talked about 4 major ingredients. I don't remember them all. One was, he said, continuous ideological development and struggle. He talked about kind of a ruthless self-criticism. Before I can criticize you and point out your faults, I need to admit my own faults and then go to what are yours. He talked about one of the other points was organized activity for every member. You don't just get up and do your thing. You work, there's some consensus about what everybody's to be doing from one day to the next and so on. Boggs, James and Grace Boggs, they had a group called Committee for Political Development. These were a lot of younger people that they influenced. They put out a lot of interesting pamphlets then, because we had a habit in SNCC of saying that reading is a middle class habit. You're not going to get people to read. Just like even now, people are not reading, they watch movies. And they got these cell phones, they glued to these cell phones, picking up information. But we would put out short pamphlets as guides to help people develop. Jim Foreman talked about it was important that we organize workers at the center of production. So we go to workers in major areas of work, and auto workers was one area, and so on. But I don't know what all the differences were that came about and caused some people to take up other positions. Dan Aldridge was a hell of a brother, Dorothy Dewberry's husband. I understand Dan's a preacher now, which is mind blowing. But anyway, that's what I hear. Okay, but he gave up. I still have all those copies of all those speeches. Dan was powerful, man. It's perplexing. There was something else you asked, but it's just perplexing for me. And I think some of this stuff was caused by agents, but I can't finger the agents because, again, I wasn't in those particular areas and could see how people were operating, how they were operating, what their practice was. But we had a habit in our neighborhood of saying, you don't run up to us on a corner and say, let's go over there and slap that cop, or let's go bust this window over here. First thing we're gonna ask you is, who are you? And who can vouch for you? And when was the last time you were in a fight? And did you run, or did you stand the ground and fight? Or what did, what's your history? Who are you? And that's what people need to be, those are the questions we need to be asking today, rather than just letting informants and actual police inside our organizations.
Does anyone, I'd like to ask one more question, but I don't want to take away time from our guests. May I?
Sure.
Ron, you know what? So, you and
I wanted to show, this is our SNCC. This is the SNCC sign we used to mount on our door at our 2 offices here in LA. Yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, and you and I have talked about this, the issue of CAP. I noticed that in most of the books that I've read, there might be 1 or 2 sentences about CAP. Can you give us a little more information about how CAP operated? And then what was unique about CAP, and how did the Panthers learn about your strategy?
I don't know how they learned, but Oakland and LA aren't that far apart when you look at the world, and communication. But I remember reading somewhere when Bobby Seale acknowledged that the Panthers got the idea of putting patrols out to observe the police from Community Alert Patrol here in Los Angeles, and I was very gratified very happy to see that when I read that here. But one of the things about the patrol, we made it clear that it's tough to say this, you had to have courage, you had to have determination, you had to have a whole lot of common sense, but you also had to be a little bit foolhardy to actually go out here. These police in LA ain't no joke. They actually go out here and literally confront the police. I confronted the police. You had to be somewhat out of your mind to do that. I'm saying you had to have common sense, but you also had to be, it took courage, because I still have the roster of the guys that rode in the patrol. We made it very clear that when you went out, you couldn't have any alcohol or weapons in the vehicle. All your running gear needed to be in good order in terms of your lights and all that. Your license had to be up there. Police wrote one brother a ticket for having, and I remember the language, a deliberately torn and mutilated driver's license. How did the police know it's deliberately torn and mutilated? But he actually wrote that on the damn ticket. And brother went to court. They wrote me a ticket one time. They got out the car and got down with a measuring tape and measured the front license plate on my hoopty from the bottom of the plate to the ground, and it was 11 inches. And they wrote me a ticket saying that by law, it had to be at least, the bottom of the license plate had to be at least 12 inches from the ground. And so they wrote me a ticket for that. They wrote me a ticket one time. I never even got my copy for being illegally parked at the intersection of Harvard and Western in Los Angeles. Anybody that knows LA knows that Harvard and Western run parallel. They don't intersect anywhere in the city. But they wrote me a ticket for that. I used to go to court with a shoebox, what I call a shoebox full of tickets. I used to go to that Wall Street court, and it was interesting. They had a white judge there who actually sympathized with what we were doing, trying to put trying to get some controls on what the police were doing. And so when I would come into court with my attorney, he would call court into recess and call us into the judge's chambers and tell me and the attorney, say, look, I understand what you're trying to do and I support you, but you got 15, 20 tickets here. Let's see what we're gonna do. Well, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna fine you for these 7, and these other 8 over here, I'm gonna send you to driving school, traffic school, because I want you to keep your license. That's how I managed to keep my license. But one of the beautiful things about the patrol is that so many guys from varying neighborhoods, we had joined together. I wish I could tell the Ooga Booga story, but there's probably not enough time.
You know what? I want
it.
you to, but can you tell us about how many cars were there, and when did you go out? Did you go out every day? Did you go in the mornings? Did you go in the evening? How did you decide when to go on patrol?
It depended on our time, what time we had, and how much gas, because we relied on well-wishers. Sometimes somebody would just give us their gas credit card to go to the gas station and fill up our tanks. Other days we were just raking and scraping. Okay, it depends on how we felt. And I used to ride alone a lot. The police stopped me one time and 2 police snatched me out of the window of the car. They didn't even open the door. They snatched me, pulled me through the window, beat me, put the pistol to my head and pulled the trigger several times. And I thought they were gonna blow my head off. Luckily, that didn't happen, of course. But I'm saying this is the kind of stuff that went on. You said Ooga Booga. I'll try to tell it.
Yeah, tell us the Ooga Booga story. Because it's important for people to understand that the cops, they ran from the patrol sometimes.
Oh yeah, let me tell you about that.
Yeah, they didn't just.
We were passing Manual Arts High School there on Vermont one time. Me and I had a rider with me, and we saw a black and white police cruiser and the 2 white police. They had stopped a black couple there. And so I'm on the opposite side of the street going north, but I actually U-turned in the middle of the street, which was illegal. As I'm driving up, both of these white cops are staring me down with a strange look on their face. When I U-turn, as I'm U-turning, they run to the car, give the people back their license and tell them to go, and they go jump in their car and take off. And I chased them. I chased the police. I'm in a hoopty chasing a brand new police cruiser. I chased them for a couple of blocks. And then I finally looked at the brother next to me. And I said, man, I think we need to leave this alone because they may try to lure us into some ambush. And he agreed. And so we actually chased the police. But I want to tell the Ooga Booga story. We were fooling around in our office one time, a bunch of us, trying to decide where we were going to patrol that night. It was maybe about 10 of us. And we had agreed to where we were going to go and stuff. But as we talking, I said to some brother, something came up. And I just said, Ooga Booga. He said, Ooga Doo. I said, ah-da-da. We ain't talking about nothing. And so we laughed it off and we went on out and got in our cars eventually. And we went on out. And so that morning, late that night, it had to be midnight or 1 or something, but it was very late. I got a brother with me and I'm riding. I'm going south on Central Avenue toward Imperial Highway. And there was a place right there on the corner. It's not there anymore. It was called The Stop. And it was a little place where you could stop and get some chips, a little something to drink. And I liked hot chocolate because it was kind of cold. And I told the brother with me, I said, I'm gonna stop and get some hot chocolate. He said, yeah, okay, cool. So there was another alert patrol car not far away. And we had citizens band radios, and we communicated with we had a huge antenna at our office, which was right on Adams and right off of just west of Vermont, 1 block. But anyway, I said, so there was a car nearby, not far away, and I told him he said, hey, I'd like some hot chocolate too. So we agreed to meet. So we got to an intersection and we hooked up. And so I got this other community alert patrol car. We both got the big white signs on our doors on the side. And we going south on Central. And I look back, and in no time at all, we got 2 black and white police cruisers chasing us, behind us. We get to Imperial Highway and we pull to the right. And we park and get out of the cars. And the police jump out behind us with their weapons drawn. They all white cops, all red-faced. And they said, you goddamn niggas, get your hands up against that wall over there. Don't look back and don't say a word. So we all raise our hands and we walk up to the wall. We go up to the wall and we standing there. And so the cops rush up. Some of them are going in each up, both of our cars, and they pulling the wires out from our radios so we can't communicate with each other and all that, searching the car. and then others are searching us. So there's one searching me, and there's one searching the brother next to me to my right. And so I'm trying to figure out what we could do at that moment. And so it comes to mind. So I say to the brother next to me, I said, "Ooga booga." And he said, "Ooh doo." I said, "Ooh." And the police tell me, say, "Shut up. Stop making that noise." And so I said, "Ooh doo doo." And so the one that's got me looks at the other one and says, "Joe, you better be careful, because I think this one just told the one you got to reach for a weapon, for his weapon." And so I want to laugh so hard, but I'm trying to keep a straight face till they get through, right? So they call in, they get a call on their radio, on their walkie-talkie, that they had run makes on all, they had our IDs and stuff. We all came back clear. So the cop that's got me looks at me and says, "Well, you all clear. None of you have any wants or warrants. And so we're gonna get out of here and we're gonna let you go. You got that?" So I just kind of look at him and nod, and he lets me go, and they let the other brother go. And they said, "But we don't want you to go back to your cars until we've gotten in our cars and we're clear out of sight. You got that?" And I give him a nod again, approving. So they get in the car and they take off, and I fall on the street. I fall down the street so hard, laughing. I don't know. It was uncontrollable. The laughter that we had freaked these damn police out. Got away with it. That's the Ooga Booga story. You know, but that's an alert patrol story. All right. I think that's our best one.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Keith has a question, and if no one else does, then we'll sign off. So Keith.
Okay.
Did the Community Alert Patrol ever consider arming themselves?
No, we hadn't gotten that far. It's funny because it's just how your mind works. Just like we never considered proposing that police be defunded. We never thought about that.
Because the Mulford Act had not been established, so you could have been armed, right?
What do you mean? You said, what did you say?
The Mulford Act. That's the act that did the Panthers. When the Panthers showed up, they were protesting the Mulford Act, which was to not allow you to open carry in California, I think.
In Sacramento,
I'm not sure. I know because
because that was 67, and you were 66, and you started before the Panthers, and the Panthers were armed, but you guys could have been armed, but you never thought about that, huh?
No, but I did get busted once. One of my bus was armed and concealed and loaded weapon. I had 2 pistols.
Patrolling?
I did, but that was later. But no, being the patrol, no. It's funny how consciousness advances. We hadn't thought about it. You know, one of the things I did later, another organization I belonged to was the Black Education Commission, where we were putting pressure on the LA school district and on school security for putting Black students on lockdown in LA schools. I did a comparative study looking at 9 outlying, predominantly white high schools that had open campuses yet were reporting more crime than 9 inner city high schools that reported less crime and were closed campuses and had 2, 3 or more armed security. The only elementary school, this was in 1979, the only elementary school in LA was Manchester Elementary. It was predominantly Black then. It was the only one with an armed security. So I wrote a piece, which was a hell of a scathing piece, called Racism, Repression, and Inefficiency in the Deployment and Practices of School Security. And we printed it. It was an 80-page document. I went to the school board and pulled it out of the meeting, and we slammed it on the table in front of them. The media is always at the school board meetings. The school board members, their mouths fell open. They still voted $1 million more for the budget for the LA school security, even though I showed them using the LA Security's own data that showed that they were that we used to call Fremont Prismont, because it was more like a damn prison with everything locked and the rest. But anyway, so, but no, going back to the patrol days, we had not advanced. I hadn't, and when I say we, and I put a lot of the blame, responsibility on me in leadership position, had not thought that far ahead to do some of this stuff.
Okay, Curtis.
And then if I would have been armed, if we had decided to be armed, I don't think we'd have had no signs on the side of the car running down the street armed. I don't know. You have to, this brother laugh. Yeah, you ain't gonna put no sign on the side of your car. I'm armed. You know, I ain't gonna come get me.
Curtis, just let me ask one question. Ron, what did you do? So you patrolled, and if you saw a police officer
Stop somebody, what we would
stop
do,
someone, then what did you do?
we pulled up behind the police. We had a practice of staying at least 10 feet distant. We had to be very careful about anything we said to who they had stopped, any interaction, because they can say you're interfering with an arrest if an arrest was what they were pursuing. One of the things they used to do, and we would get out with our cameras. I got pictures. They started having police with cameras. So I got more pictures of the police photographing me, photographing them. All right. They used to have when the skating rink closed down here on 78th and Central, which was real popular in our neighborhood. People started going out to Hollywood to the skating rink. And when they'd come back at night, it would be after 10 o'clock, after curfew. They would stop at the El Rey taco stand on Normandy and Santa Barbara. Now it's Normandy and Obama. What is it? Normandy and King. Normandy and Martin Luther King. And the police would come in and just arrest them. But the curfew statute states that even though if you're a minor, you're under 18, as long as you're on your way home, you can stop someplace to get a bite to eat, which is what these youngsters were doing. And so we would come there, and the police right up the street, and what's the university called, University Precinct, then at Southwest or something else now. But they would come down with an armada, like 20, 25 police cars, and come in and just swarm and start arresting all these Black youth. And I would be out there protesting. And I would go to the station, to the police station, after they would arrest them, and demand to see the desk, the dude at the front desk, and tell him you had no right to arrest these people. They're within their rights. They stopped for a bite to eat. Yes, they're underage, but the curfew law permits them to stop. This is racist. So I used to do that. I used to go down, used to raise hell. But this is, you say, what did we do? This is what we did. And because we were the patrol, and one time I told a young Black girl, I said, to hell with the police. And the police, when I got down to the station that night, the police had heard me in the street. So he told the desk captain, whatever they call the desk guy, yeah, he even said to hell with the police. And I said, yeah, I said it. Because you wrong, you damn wrong. But this is the stuff we did, even though it didn't get pressed, some of that, we just did it. But those were our limits because we didn't know, we hadn't thought beyond that moment.
Okay, we have 2 more questions and then we'll sign off. Austin?
Okay, and I hope to get to California sometime to meet you in person. So if you can't expound.
And then we can really talk, yeah.
As much as you'd like on this, that's okay. It's sort of a big question, but I'm curious whether you and your comrades were sort of dismissive of what some of the leaders were saying, and we've moved beyond CAP now and into SNCC, because you said you hadn't actually gotten there yet. But I mean, if you listen to Rap Brown's speeches, which you say you had a defense committee for, he's there. He's already passed there. And somebody asked a question earlier about Ralph Featherstone, and he's there as a member of SNCC. And if you dig pretty deeply into Professor Umoja's book, We Will Shoot Back, he's talking about what SNCC has morphed into, even in the South. I mean, there's a community, I grew up in Mississippi, there's a town right next to my town where till this day, white folks are still afraid to go into because of what SNCC did to them back then. It wasn't registering people to vote. So I'm just trying to figure out how you worked around this idea of armed struggle, retaliatory violence against the oppressor. I could see it with Cat not being there, but by 67, not only do we have Newark and Detroit, but Elizabeth Hinton has showed us there's 120 other cities that are experiencing these same types of rebellions. So I'm trying to figure out how it is you avoid that in a place as volatile as Los Angeles.
It's tough because you have to look at what do you do? Who's prepared to do what you're suggesting? Who's prepared to take them on? Take on the police and the army. With the rebellion, for example, halfway through it, they called in the military. When they called in the military, we said, we just saying ourselves on the street, we said and shouted to someone, say, you cheating. Because we thought we just supposed to fight the police. Now y'all done brought in the military. On the last day, the 6th day of the uprising, I'm gonna come back to what you were saying though. But on the last day of the uprising, I was walking down Avalon toward Imperial, and a truck went by full of troops, full of National Guard, white boys. Probably 40 or 50 guys on the truck, if that many. And they were looking at me, sneering. Some of them were saying little cursing. And so I gave them the finger. And I said, F all of you. And in fact, this is some insanity, but I stared at them and I said, get out on, I'll say, all of you, I'll whoop everybody on the truck. I looked at it, I said, I'll whoop everybody on this truck. And a couple of them jumped up. And a dude who was in charge told him to sit back down. He sat back down. And I kept on walking. And when the truck went on, the light changed and they went on. And I said to myself, you damn fool. How you say something like that? I had to check myself. But no, it's more than a notion when you decide you're going to take on the state apparatus. And I go back to Boggs. I go back to what the awesome responsibility is. What you have to organize. You got to actually have the I don't want to say instrument, but you have to have it goes back to Kwame Ture, the Stokely organization. You got to have organization. You're gonna take power, you got to have organization. And you can't think about you're gonna fight everybody. You gotta turn some of these people around. Right. Some people are still in a frame of mind where they ask, we want more Black cops. The Black cops were the worst, because when we get stopped, they would show out, they would kick our behind to show out for their white handlers. So the last thing you want is Black cops and Black troops, but when you have them, you gotta also think about how can you turn some of them around mentally? How can you get to them mentally and turn them around so you're not up against all that? Because you see this thing, we said we weren't going to talk about Ukraine, but you see this thing, you see all the weapons these people got just to send to Ukraine, and the dollars. This is what you up against a hell of a structure. You talk about taking power away from those with the power in this country. And it's going to take serious organization. I'm sorry.
And last question, we appreciate that, is Dr. Henderson.
Yes, I so appreciate it, Brother Wilkins. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this right now. And one of the things got to be like there's nothing like Watts. One thing, y'all don't have an example to follow except Detroit in 43, which is not in y'all experience. But Watts, Newark, and Detroit are in orders of magnitude above these others. And y'all such a minority, you're not just going up against the police, that's Chief Parker down there. He's the prototype for these white supremacists all over the country.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand why this ain't in your purview right there. You know what I'm saying? So I ain't mad at you at all. But I want to say, brother, I got to ask you this. How'd you get the nickname Crook? I want to ask you that. And then the other one I got to ask is, and is that a nickname or is that a slur? I want to be clear, brother, because that's how it was introduced to me. And the second one is, I think I think you're being too modest. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. That Oogum Boogum story, you done sent. If you were in the Slausons, that probably became a urban legend. You probably sent more people to Swahili class because they saying, if we can trick them with made up words, imagine when we were in the language. And the last thing is my proof of this, Brother Wilkins, Brenton Wood, who did the Oogum Boogum song, which you know is a hit in '67, he's from LA. So if that's on you, Brother Wilkins, I just want to say.
What was your first point again? You said, oh, crook.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
I was, we were almost all of us throughout, unemployment was the order of the day. We didn't have no jobs. We young growing up, no money. I was resourceful. We used to throw beach parties and cookouts and stuff. One time we went into a store on Central Avenue. You know how you go in and get empty boxes? So I got a box and I gave it when I walked up to the cashier. Before I got to the cashier, I went over where the chickens were and I put a couple of chickens in the box. And when I went by the cashier, I held the box up high over my head and said, it's just an empty box. And she said, no, let me see. I said, no, it's just an empty box. And I kept on walking. I walked on out the store. And dude who was with me said, man, you a crook. But I'll tell you where it really came from, heavy duty was, and I won't name the store, but there was a major store in our neighborhood. And a lot of people used to come there and shop, and a lot of white people from the surrounding areas would come and shop as well. But they had a big tractor trailer truck. They used to park them on the parking lot. And I lived a couple of houses off the parking lot up the street. And I had a whole lot of padlocks because we used to raise pigeons, and I had chains on to keep people from stealing my pigeons. I had all these assortment of padlocks. So I walked by one of the tractor trailers one day on the parking lot for this store, and they had armed security out there. He wasn't looking, but I noticed the lock was identical to one of the locks I had. So I had an idea. I went back to where my pigeon cage was and took one of my locks. And I came back before the store closed. And when the guard wasn't looking, I switched the locks. I took their lock off, put mine there, and I went on. And that night, I came back and I opened the lock and I opened the damn doors to the tractor trailer. It was loaded with air conditioning units. I called everybody I could in the neighborhood and told, come get you something. I got something here for you. And they came, and one of the dudes said, man, you a hell of a crook. But that's how I got it from my homies, man. They actually dubbed me crook. And I just went with that. And then as the movement came along, you were sister so-and-so, a brother. So I was brother crook. Let me tell you a quick thing. A few years ago, I lived in Belize for a while, but I just been back here in the US about 3 years or so. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I came up here to LA and I was in Leimert Park where they do a lot of serious Black cultural stuff. And I was in a building waiting for an event, I'm sitting in a chair, and a Black man was in a chair behind me. He kept looking at me all excited, and he kept looking and staring. So I looked back, and so when I made eye contact, he said, are you Brother Crook? So I looked him straight in the eye and I said, yes, I'm the one they called Crook. He said, I thought so. I said, who are you? He said, I'm Officer so-and-so and so. He was an older Black man. He said, I'm retired LAPD. I used to work 77th precinct. I said, yeah, the one we called Little Mississippi. He said, yeah, that's right. He said, I just got to tell you something. I said, what is that? He said, every day we used to come to work and look in the assembly room at 77th, on the wall, they had a big picture of you and that car you used to drive. And they ordered us to be on the lookout for you. And they said, whenever we saw you, to give you hell. And I said, is that right? He said, yeah, that's right. I said, well, you know what? I'm so glad you told me, because I knew it then, but I never heard it come from the mouths of one of you. And then I turned back around, and then after about 5 minutes, I eased on out, because I said, this, and it's interesting, it's been more than 50 years, man. And this dude remembers me. And so they have vendettas. So I left after about 5 minutes, because I said he might just decide to take me out and get the credit. So I said, let me get up and get out of here. So I just got up and left. But yeah, but that's where Crook came from. I was resourceful. Yeah. Okay, brother. It wasn't no slur.
Well, thank you, Ron. You know, I met you as Ron during the anti-apartheid movement. I had joined the cultural boycott under Ron's leadership, and that's how we met. But thank you for, first of all, we're glad you survived.
Thank you. I am too.
We're glad that you survived to tell the tales. Thank you for educating us. We have a small crowd, but these are very serious people who are writers and thinkers and teachers. And so this is really good information that they can impart to their classes and to their mentees and to their colleagues. So this was great for us. And we really appreciate you coming.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having me. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And if anybody wants to stay on and chat before they sign off, please feel free.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you, Tony, for coming.
Ron is available. Some of you professors should bring him to your universities.
Oh, absolutely. You know, he would. I'm sure you're available for speaking engagements, right, Ron?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
I wanted to say, and I didn't get a chance to say, after SNCC and all that, I went on to work with Patrice Lumumba Coalition. I worked with outstanding brothers like Ilombe Brath out of New York, who passed away some years ago. Great brother. But I went to Congo. I went to Libya twice in violation of the travel ban to Libya. So how's a president like a white man like Reagan gonna tell me I can't go home to Africa? Africa's my home. I can go home anytime I get ready. And so I went. I went to a number of places and met so many. My last trip was to Zimbabwe. We sat down and met with Robert Mugabe, the president. And we arrived the day they were arresting hundreds of white farmers who had refused to give up all but one farm. I never saw white men being arrested by Black troops and Black police and put in chain cuffs. Like they put us in chain cuffs here, they had them in chain cuffs there, and they had actually witnessed that. When I was in Libya, I saw Black Libyan women in part of the Libyan Air Force under Gaddafi, getting the latest Soviet MiGs and take off into the sky. And when they went overhead, we had to cover our ears because the noise was so loud. I've never seen that before or since, and I miss Gaddafi. Gaddafi was a great asset for Africa and the world, and we don't understand that. And this Negro president we had here, along with that witch Hillary, made sure he was taken out. And we need to be very clear about that.
Ron, can I put your email in the chat?
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, real quick here. You said Afro-American Skills Bank, and you said it went from Afro-American Skills Bank to what now?
To the it was the Afro-American Skills Bank to the Pan-African Skills Project. Yeah, Pan-African Skills Project, run by.
And Ron has a photo archive of his travels that's absolutely unmatched. And I'm looking forward to the day that you can make those photos public so that people can see them and utilize them in their work, license them from you and utilize them. Beautiful photos.
Yeah.
Because he's a photographer too.
Yeah, hopefully that day will come, yes. And also demand that H. Rap Brown, Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, because he's Muslim now, he's in jail for life in Tucson, and demand that they release him. Demand that they release him.
Do you know what the status is of H. Rap Brown?
Well, they just, he was going blind because he's got serious eye problems. And because of pressure, they finally gave in and did some eye surgery, I understand, and he's got his eyesight restored.
Oh, good,
He
good.
had a great brother, Ed Brown. We lost Ed some years ago. There's so many soldiers, beautiful soldiers that are just gone.
You know, Matulu Shakur had the same problem and he finally had eye surgery. I used to email him in all caps and hope that he could read it. And now he says, you can lowercase it, you know? So, and he has a parole hearing on April 12th.
Okay, we need to make some.
You know, he has stage 4 cancer. He has multiple myeloma. He's been surviving it, which is great. He's had COVID 3 times.
Wow.
His attorneys have applied for compassionate release at least 3 or 4 times, and they keep finding reasons to deny it. So we don't know what's going to happen on April 12th. He had something called good time that was never given to him, about it would, I think, come up to maybe 3 years of good time, because his new release date is in 2024. They denied him release time by saying that, well, since you moved from one prison to the next, and then, you know, the prison that he's in is near a medical center that is treating him. But since he moved to that prison in Kentucky, the courts argued that his good time needed to be he had to start over. I don't know what the term is, but he had to start the good time over. So he has no good time anymore. And so, but there was some issue that led to this new parole hearing, and we're hopeful, but not that hopeful.
Okay. You know,
Sorry,
someone else who needs our support.
I know the legal terminology, but you know, this is what they do.
Yeah, someone else who needs our support badly is Ruchell McGee. Brother Ruchell McGee, from back in the day. He's probably been in the prison probably somewhere around 60 years now.
Harold Welton.
Harold Welton is pushing for that. There's a billboard there on Slauson near Overhill, just east of Overhill. Go check it out. But people need to put pressure on Governor Newsom here to release Ruchell McGee. But thank you, yes.